Good evening. As the Executive Director of the City Club of Central Oregon and as the co-chair of the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County's candidate forums, I would like to welcome you to the candidate forum for the Oregon Democratic Secretary of State primary. This is a partisan race, and Oregonians have until April 30th to change their party selection or register to vote on the Secretary of State website in order to participate. On behalf of the City Club of Central Oregon, the City Club of Portland, the City Club of Eugene, and the League of Women Voters of Deschutes County, we thank the candidates for participating and appreciate the gravity of running for office. Our moderator today is Tim Trainor, editor of the Redmond Spokesman. Tim?
All right. Thanks, everyone, for participating. For viewers and listeners, I'll give a brief outline of the role you're running for. An Oregon Secretary of State is one of 3 constitutional officers of the executive branch chosen via statewide election. They are next in line to be governor should the current office holder leave the position. Candidates here are running for a 4-year term. The winner of the May primary will advance to the general election in November. All 4 Democratic candidates for this important position are with us today: James Cray, James Manning, Tobias Read, and David Stauffer. Some basic ground rules, so we make sure we get everyone equal time to speak. You have 1 minute for opening remarks before we go to questions, where you'll have 90 seconds to respond to each. I will interrupt you as needed when your time is expired. And when we reach the end of our questions, each candidate will get a 2-minute closing statement. For opening statements, we've randomly selected the order, and it will then be rotated for each question. So, Mr. Cray, you will go first. Please begin with your opening remarks and introduction.
In 2022, just under 67% of registered voters voted in Oregon. In 2004, it was just under 86.5%. So why the huge drop in voter participation? To me, it's because people don't feel like their vote means anything. And what I want to do is, when I am elected, on the Secretary of State's website, I'll add a new tab. I'm going to call it the electronic candidate form. And what that's going to do is allow any registered voter to ask questions of any or all of the candidates, and then easily compare and contrast the different answers. This is going to engage, empower, and educate voters, especially young voters, because young voters are tied to their smartphones. It's just a way of life. And any smartphone, any tablet, any desktop you have, you can ask a question of any or all of the candidates. People that are running for office are applying for a job. And every job that I've ever applied for, you had to go through an interview. And that's what this
Thanks,
will
James.
be.
We're trying to keep these to a minute just for a quick introduction. So, Mr. Manning, would you please give a 1-minute introduction and opening remark?
Thank you. My name is James Ivory Manning, Jr. I'm a public servant running to restore the trust and integrity of the office of Secretary of State. I will defend democracy, preserve vote by mail, and ensure our election workers and protected our Oregon data is secure. As a former United States Army Assistant Inspector General, I will use the power of the audit to ensure that transparency, accountability of all of our department agencies and state-run programs. As a member of the state land boards, Oregonians can count on me to ensure that our public lands, waterways, and state forests are not for sale. That's why I've earned exclusive endorsement of Congressman Peter DeFazio and the Sierra Club and 350 Salem, Oregon. My commitment to preserve our precious natural resources for a future generation is unwavering.
Thank you, Mr. Manning. Mr. Stauffer, you're next.
The Secretary of State is also the chair of the Board of Sustainability and Environment. See ORS 184.421 at SWEEK. I am the best person to fulfill this role because I have 5 practical, workable, affordable, profit-making, politically correct, patented inventions that can greatly improve Oregon's environment. One of my inventions can heat your house and air condition your house or building and heat your water so that you can have hot running water, all without burning fossil fuels that pollute the air. If thousands of houses and buildings quit polluting the air, we would have fewer environmental problems with global warming, breathing illnesses, and air pollution. I have another patented invention that can generate electricity from pollution-free and inexpensive wind power, and another to generate electricity by pollution-free and inexpensive wave power. You may find these environmental solutions spelled out in the videos on the Facebook site of Dave Stauffer for Secretary of State.
Thanks, Mr. Stauffer. And Mr. Read.
Well, thanks to the city clubs for this opportunity. I'm running for Secretary of State because it is a really important job with important responsibilities. That is always true, but it's especially true right now when so much of what we care about and count on for our system of government is at risk. We should not make the mistake of thinking that the wonderful way we do elections in Oregon with mail-in ballots and automatic voter registration are invulnerable. There are people who are trying to roll that back, who are threatening violence and intimidation. So the Secretary of State needs to be in a strong position to defend those. In addition, the Secretary of State is the auditor, and we need an audit process that is driven not by politics, but by a realistic and rigorous assessment of risk. Those are the things that I will bring to the office. I also want to bring my experience as a statewide elected official, running an agency, setting a mission, and ensuring accountability. There's no substitute for that experience in Oregon, running a statewide agency. That's why I've got the endorsement of the 3 former secretaries of state who have endorsed in this race.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to some questions here. Many of them supplied from City Club, League of Women Voters, and journalists at EO Media Group. You'll each have 90 seconds to answer. We'll once again kind of continue with our route there and we'll start this time with Mr. Manning. So the first question is to you. The Secretary of State has many responsibilities, but also latitude for how they spend their time and resources. What would you prioritize if you were elected to this position?
Well, thank you for a question, which is really important. I've been in the Oregon State Senate for 8 years. I am a 2-term consecutive Senate President pro tem. I've had the luxury of meeting with constituents on an array of issues for the last 8 years. Some of the things that really popped up to my mind and attention that bears a lot of attention right now is one, hiring practices that we have with ODOT. When it comes time to minority hires and women hires. The other one is when we're talking about the current hospital and medical situation that we have here in the state. That is critically important to me because we've got hospitals and urgent care centers that are closing down at an alarming rate, specifically in my area. The other one is I receive so many calls for assistance for people who can't get unemployment. So I think that OHA will be a priority because of the issues that I've been hearing for the last 8 years. ODOT, because of the issues I've been hearing for the last 8 years. And Oregon Employment Department, because there's so many people that are hurting. Those will be 3 priorities that I will be looking at with use of the tool of the audit.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Stauffer, on to you. 90 seconds about kind of where you would put your resources and time in this position.
Well, I am the solutions candidate. That is that we've got some glaring problems in Oregon that have not been addressed. We've got traffic jams, rush hour traffic jams of people getting into the cities in the morning and leaving the cities in the evening. And we haven't got any solution for that. I do have a solution to decrease those traffic jams. We've got wildfires and drought that are robbing a lot of the farmers and ranchers of their means of livelihood. We've got problems with the Klamath River Basin where the salmon don't have enough water to swim up the river and spawn. I've got solutions to address those problems. They've been long-standing problems. I hope to work with the governor and implement my solutions. In addition, we're lucky at this point because President Biden has approximately $1.4 trillion to spend on infrastructure. And I would like Oregon to get a big share of that so that we can institute the solutions that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reed, what would you prioritize if elected to this position?
You know, I appreciate this question because it gives me a chance to think back when I became state treasurer 7+ years ago. And I think when you think about the responsibilities that the Secretary of State's office has, the most important is elections. We have such a wonderful set of policies that we've instituted in Oregon, but we shouldn't take them for granted, and we shouldn't assume that they can't be made better. So making sure that we have policies in place to help people feel confident about the way we run elections. We've made it pretty easy in Oregon, but people still have to choose to vote. So continuing to defend our system against people who would undercut or threaten people who are carrying out elections or participating. In addition to that, the audit power of the Secretary of State can further contribute to people's confidence about state government, and making sure that those audits are driven not by a particular agenda, but by efficiency and effectiveness, as a desire to make sure that our dollars are spent appropriately, that programs and agencies are operating well. Finally, I think we have seen a lot of turnover and turmoil in the Secretary of State's office, and making sure that hundreds of employees that work there have the resources they need to do their job, that there is an expectation of integrity and transparency. Those are going to be priorities, and that's the lesson that I can bring from serving successfully as state treasurer. No substitute for that kind of experience in this office.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cray, 90 seconds on your priorities.
What I'm going to do is travel around the state and go to every county, and in every county, I'm going to meet with the county clerk, because the county clerk is where the rubber meets the road on voting and elections. So it's important to have a really good working relationship with them. The other thing I'm going to do when I go to each county is to visit as many high schools and colleges as possible. And at each college and high school that I go to, I'm going to talk about the electronic candidate form and explain to them that they have a power that they didn't have before. And that power is to ask questions of any, as long as they're a registered voter, ask questions of any or all the candidates. You know, everybody's got some kind of an issue, be it student debt, be it climate change. Why not ask the people that are trying to represent us questions as to what their plans are for dealing with the issues that are important to every registered voter? So that's what I'm going to do, is spend my time traveling and talking with county clerks and young people. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We'll start our next question here with Mr. Stauffer. Last candidate elected to this position did not finish their term. If elected, what changes would you put in place to limit potential corruption in the office? 90 seconds.
I will comply with all laws. I will not take a job with any of the persons or companies that we regulate, that the Secretary of State's office regulates. I will stick to the business of being the Secretary of State. I will be in the office more than some of the prior Secretary of States were, and I will follow the law scrupulously. I was an attorney in Oregon for a number of years, and I'm familiar with what the law is. And I look forward to operating a Secretary of State's office that is above reproach and follows all the laws.
Great, thanks. Mr. Reed, what would you do to limit the potential of corruption in the Secretary of State's office?
Well, I'm very glad to talk about this, because there are a lot of similarities in the sense that in the state treasurer's office, we deal with the pension fund. We manage a portfolio of $140 billion, tens of billions of dollars of debt. So we're comfortable with processes that manage for conflicts of interest and those kinds of concerns. So I'll take that same sensibility to the Secretary of State's office and look for opportunities to make sure that we have safeguards in place. The advantage I have in that respect is a record here. So I will not have any other job. I won't have time to do any other job. There is a lot of work to do in the Secretary of State's office. I'm looking forward to that, and making sure that the processes and the safeguards that we have in place are as robust and significant as possible.
Great, thanks. Mr. Cray, what would you do to limit the potential of corruption?
The thing is that I'm pretty conservative on this kind of thing. I am not the kind of guy that goes to see how close to the line I can get ethically. And so I'm going to give it a wide berth and be very careful about that. I'm running for this office because I want to have this electronic candidate form. I'm not going to imperil that by doing something that is untoward or doesn't have some good thinking behind it. So the other thing I'm going to do to demonstrate that this is an open office is, this is kind of unique. Every day I'm in the office, I'm going to answer the phone at least one time. So somebody that's expecting to get into some phone queue and have to push 14 buttons before they get to a live person are going to be greeted with this: "Hey, this is Jim Cray. I'm Secretary of State. How can I help you?" They're going to wonder what the heck happened to them. So I'm going to be open, I'm going to be transparent, and I'm not even going to come close to the line. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Manning, if you could please explain what you would do to reduce the potential of corruption in the office.
Well, this is about leadership. This is about values. This is about integrity. I spent 24 years active duty United States Army. I am a proud, decorated retiree. So when you talk about what sets everybody above, clearly it sets me above. I am a graduate of the United States Army Inspector General University. So I know the value of integrity. Lead by example. I hold myself fully accountable. And then I will be conducting sensing sessions to all of the employees to find out what are those things that they need to help them to become successful. This is not about previous things that, accomplishments, we can all tout about that. I have passed over 124 enrolled bills since I've been in the Senate. I think that could be a record, but that's not what this is about. This is about leadership and integrity. Do as you are supposed to do and follow the law, follow the rules. These are basic values of honesty and integrity. Those are the things that I will instill, and those are the things that I will set the example and live by.
Thank you. Let's go to Mr. Read to start the next question here. In many states, Secretary of State is not an elected position. Do you think that it should be? Please explain why or why not. And kind of a piece of that we're thinking about is, do you think an elected position should be in charge of certifying elections?
Well, I think there is a lot to think about and to talk about in that question, but it has been helpful. And I've actually faced a similar set of questions when I ran for treasurer, because you can make similar arguments there. But I think it is useful for voters to have an opportunity to weigh in on who plays a role of the Secretary of State in Oregon. It's not only elections, that's obviously very important, but there are other roles that the Secretary of State plays where I think voters have a role to hold the Secretary of State accountable. And I think that's appealing to have that direct accountability. The audit function matters a lot. And I think it's important for a Secretary of State, an auditor in this case, to be able to demonstrate their integrity and their faithfulness to the mission. Similarly, the Secretary of State is a member of the Land Board, and voters should have an opportunity to understand what kind of an approach, what kind of experience, what kind of outlook a Secretary of State would bring to the Land Board. So there's always interesting questions and conversations to have about that, but I think it is really important that voters have a chance to weigh in on this office. That's the way we operate right now, and it's important that each of the candidates who are aspiring to that office have the opportunity to present their values, their experience, and that's, I think, what separates us in this race. There's only 3 secretaries of state who have decided to weigh in this office. People who have done the job before, they've all endorsed me.
Great, thanks. Mr. Clary, we'll go to you. Existential question here. This position you're running for, should it be an elected position?
Yes, it should be elected position, and it should be subject to voters' questions. Therefore, it's going to be more important than ever that the electronic candidate form is put into place. So future people running for this office or any elected office who want to say, hey, I want to represent you, well, they need to go through the job interview conducted by the voters, and that's the electronic candidate form. So absolutely yes, it should be an elected position, and absolutely yes, it should be subject to questions from the voters and others.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Manning, we'll go to you next.
Yes, this job is critically important. The Secretary of State's office is one that my qualifications as a diplomat, active duty military, my experience at the federal level, having to coordinate with friend allies and foreign dignitaries, my experience as a certified mediator, my experience as a police officer, my experience as a soldier in the United States Army for over 24 years have taught me that protecting our democracy is number one. Protecting the Constitution is number one. Protecting the Constitution of the state of Oregon is number one. And anyone that goes into or competes or aspire to become Secretary of State must go through a scrutiny such as we're trying to do now, trying to identify who would best recommend or represent the people of Oregon in that office, Secretary of State, and no other. That's really important to me. Those are values. Those are integrity. Those are accountability questions, and they all should be vetted. So yes, I think that the Secretary of State should be elected.
Great, thanks. Mr. Stauffer, we'll finish with you.
Yes, the Secretary of State is the auditor of the governor's programs. The legislature provides the money and the direction for the programs, and the governor is charged with the responsibility of carrying out those programs. Sometimes the governor does it really well, sometimes not so well. And it's the Secretary of State's audit function to examine each of the governor's programs and make sure that the programs are being operated efficiently, that they're spending the money on what the legislature wants them to spend it on, and that they're not underspending budgets either, that they're accomplishing the purposes set out by the legislature. And that's why it's good to have a separately elected Secretary of State so that they can perform this audit function that might be in somewhat of a conflict with the governor's operation of the programs. So I would continue to have the Secretary of State elected. Thank you.
Great, thank you. We will start back from the top. Mr. Cray, you have the next question here. Kind of following up on elections, a major part of this job is certifying them. Can you tell me how you think Oregon's mail-in only voting system is working, and are there any changes you would like to see?
I love voting by mail. I love the fact that you get your ballot weeks before you have to cast it. I love the fact that you don't have to go into a booth, and I love going into booths and voting too. But I like the fact that you can be at home, you can talk about how you're going to vote with your spouse or whoever you want to talk to about it. If you have a question, you can Google it, you can find an answer. So you can vote informed and with an educated way of voting. So I absolutely love it. I would do nothing to change it. I would absolutely encourage other states to do the same thing that we have. I think that the Oregon way of voting is the way that the whole nation should vote. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that want to suppress voting, and therein lies the problem. And so they are not in favor of voting by mail because it opens it up, and it's so easy for everybody to actually exercise that right of voting. So yes, absolutely, all the way.
Thank you. Mr. Manning, can you, would you make any recommended changes to the voting system in Oregon?
First, you want to expand access to the ballot. So when motor voter came into practice and became the gold plate, if you will, then last year we went to when you registered for the Oregon Health Plan, those folks will automatically be registered. Then this past session, I introduced a bill that will expand and make the door open for college and university students that have not had a chance to register to vote. Upon enrollment in school, they will automatically be registered to vote. That's a little different. Now, I also authored the bill for posted paid ballot return envelopes a few years ago. We're now doing that. Oregon has the highest voter turnout in the nation. And these are things that I had thought, and it did even before we got to this point where I'm considering running for Secretary of State. I'm a visionary. I think ahead. I see things that could be, and then I implement those. I am result oriented. There's no one like me. I am fully accountable to myself and to all of my constituents. Same day registration is something that we need to put on the table as well. So those are things that I would improve upon.
Great, thank you. Mr. Stauffer.
Our voting system in Oregon is very reputable and works extremely well. However, there are some intervening steps between the time that the voter signs the ballot and the time that it gets counted. That is, they put it in the mail. The ballot has to be sent out to them at their address that they registered when they voted or signed up to vote. And it's possible that those ballots would not get to them. And then when they send it back, it would not be counted at the right place. And that's what our good Republican friends are worried about. I don't think there's a problem with that, but I think we need to do more on the audit side to prove to the Republicans and others that that the ballots are being properly counted and that every vote is being voted the way it's supposed to be. All the voters are registered voters, and they're doing their voting. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mr. Read.
We have so much to be proud of in the way that we administer elections in Oregon, and I think that's reflected in the popularity we hear. But there are things that we can do to make them better. And I want to mention three specific things because I think this question deserves a really direct answer. One, the Secretary of State has the responsibility coming up very quickly to implement the campaign finance reform measure that was passed by the legislature. I think that's overdue, and it's a good thing that the legislature passed it. But the worst thing would be to have a bad implementation of that and create more skepticism and bad feeling amongst voters. So it's important to have a Secretary of State with a demonstrated track record of success in turning complicated policy into good results. That is me. I think there are also ways we can improve confidence amongst voters by making it easier for them to understand where their ballot is. Solutions like ballot tracks that's available in several counties across the state allow voters to understand when the ballot has been mailed to them, when it's been received on the way back, and when it's been accepted, all of which can add to that understanding. I visited with 24, maybe 25 of the 36 county clerks at this point. I heard a lot of interesting ideas from around the state on additional options, one of which comes originally from a county in California who has adapted a policy of ride-alongs with ballots. So voters who might not otherwise feel the confidence that we'd like them to can go along and understand the protocols and procedures and controls that are in place and boost their confidence. I think those are all things we should explore.
Great, thank you. Mr. Manning, we'll start with you with our next question here. We transition a little bit. A major part of this job is in its auditing powers. How would you approach that? Are there specific departments you would prepare to audit? Would you do it more or less than is currently done? What would be your philosophy?
Well, thank you for that. This is the one area that I am an expert in. As I mentioned previously, I served in the United States Army for over 24 years active duty. One of my assignments was as a U.S. Army Assistant Inspector General. There's no one on this panel that has that qualification. I received that honor by graduating from the Army Inspector General University. So I have conducted audits nationally and internationally. I've been very thorough with audits, and it's all about the leadership, how we conduct these audits, leadership. Sometimes audits can reveal good things, and we can highlight those things. But those things that are detrimental or against policy in some of the departments or some of the programs that are taxpayer funded need to be a light shine on there. The accountability part is the key to a successful audit. I've got a track record of that clear, and I stand above beyond everyone else in this area. I expect for my audit team to function at a high rate, and I will be there to help them and make sure that through training, we all have a standardized method of recognizing, executing, and then result orientation and accountability is the key to a successful audits. I've got a lot of commendations for my work.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Stauffer, how would you use your auditing powers?
I have been an auditor on a couple occasions. At one point, I was employed by Price Waterhouse and Company CPAs, and I performed just as a low-level auditor, an audit of Montana Power Company and also Longview Fiber Company in Oregon. I know what an audit involves. I know how you trace the money and ask the significant questions to determine whether the money is being spent efficiently and for the purpose for which it was intended. I've got a good background for making sure that all the money is properly accounted for. Again.
Great. Thanks. Mr. Read.
So this is a place where I think the direct experience from Treasury really matters. We manage a portfolio of $140 billion. We issue debt into the tens of billions of dollars with hundreds of thousands of accounts. All of those have to stand up to audits. We have an audit team internal to Treasury. We contract out with other firms when we need that external perspective, including the Secretary of State's office. So having that opportunity, doing the work that has to stand up to audits really matters. And that direct experience in state government, there's no substitute for that. As we enter this conversation, I think we have to acknowledge that there is a vulnerability right now that audits from the Secretary of State in many cases are perceived to be political documents where the outcome was predetermined, where the selection of the subject might have been predetermined. This is not a place where we should determine the agenda based on political preference or anecdote. We have to be driven by risk, by an understanding of where we have the greatest risk. Where are we spending the most money? Where is the well-being of Oregonians at risk? We have, I think, one of our biggest challenges in Oregon is the gap between our good intentions and our execution. We might even have a hall of fame of those good intentions that were not well executed. The power of the audit is a place to try to close that gap, and we need to do it based on data. That's going to be my approach.
Thank you. Mr. Cray.
As Secretary of State, I'm not going to be doing the auditing. There are, career staff that are going to be doing that. But as Secretary of State, I'm going to be providing oversight, and I'm also going to, set the course which way we want to go. There's certain audits that need to be done. Absolutely. The audit that has to be done if we're going to get federal monies. That's super important. That's got to be done. But I'm sure that that's taken care of. To me, I agree with Tobias about risk. And to me, the biggest risk that the state is going to suffer is IT. And so IT is going to be highly elevated. I want to make sure that we're not soft targets. Hard target is what we want to be. I don't know if anybody is absolutely hack-proof. Probably not. But we can make a hard target, and so instead of going for us, they can go to something that's not quite as hard. So concentrating on IT and making sure that auditors are not afraid to ask hard questions, not afraid to ask probing questions, and are there to do the job. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. We'll move on now to Mr. Stauffer. If you could start this question. Another major part of the job is your seat on the Oregon Land Board, which oversees valuable state assets. What would your philosophy be on that board, especially comes to state forests that are valuable to the state of Oregon? We'll start with you.
Well, I appreciate Tobias Read's solution to that problem. He was on the land board, and they figured out a way to move the forest land that the state claimed into the, I believe it was Oregon State educational program. And I would continue Mr. Reed's program in that regard.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Reed, I wonder if you can speak a bit about your time on the land board and kind of what your philosophy would be in a Secretary of State position.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind introduction from Mr. Stauffer. I have been on the land board. It's a strange thing for me to say that I'm the senior member of the land board. In fact, we had a meeting this morning. So I think you can look at my record for a pretty consistent example of how I want to continue to do that work by balancing the need for conservation and preservation with economic development. One really specific example of that is the need to rethink the way we regulate and charge for infrastructure. You know, we didn't, the systems that are built around cables and easements did not consider the way we use technology and communication now. We need a fresh look at that. We've begun that. I want to continue that. I think there is lots of room for more proactive engagement with communities that are affected by the decisions that the land board makes. And of course, the central focus has to be the idea that we are charged to bring about the greatest permanent value. It is not about short-term considerations. It's about making sure that the future generations have the same choices and the same advantages that we have now. You don't have to guess what I will be like on the land board. You can look at my record.
Thank you. Mr. Cray.
I'd like to explore the possibility of placing solar panels on some state land if it's in an area where it's not forest, it's open, and I would use the money generated, and I'm talking large scale. Two reasons. One, we need to address climate change immediately, and renewable energy is the way we need to go. The other thing is the money that would be raised by the generation of this solar energy from these panels placed on the state land would be used to offset the electrical bill for public schools, public universities. So you're fighting climate change, you're giving assistance to education by taking a bill off their monthly table, and I think it's kind of unique. So that's where I'd like to explore that.
Thanks. Mr. Manning, how would you use your seat on the State Land Board?
To begin, let me say, I started this amazing public service journey as EWEB commissioner. During that time, Nestle came to EWEB and they wanted to purchase water rights on Mackenzie River, the sole drinking water source for Eugene. I told Nestle, I said, let me see, to get this right, you want us to give you permission to sell us back our own natural resources. I led the charge and I helped kill that idea. Our state lands, our waterways are not for sale, our forests. As a member of the State Land Board, Oregonians can count on me to ensure our public lands, waterways, and state forests are not for sale. Repeat that, they are not for sale. That's why I've earned exclusive endorsement of Congressman Peter DeFazio and the Sierra Club and 350 Salem, Oregon. My commitment to preserving our precious natural resources for future generations to come is unwavering. I will not sell our waterways or our natural resources.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Reed, we'll go to you for our next question, kind of in that same vein. Another piece of this position is, as Mr. Stauffer mentioned earlier, the Sustainability Environment Board. Take me through your philosophy and how you would lead that part of the job.
Well, it's interesting. That was one of the bills that I authored in my freshman session in the legislature to make the Sustainability Board a permanent feature of state government. And I think it's entirely appropriate because the questions of sustainability are timeless. They're not going away. And though they will change, I think that has to be a priority for us permanently. I go back to the definition that I got of sustainability from an economics professor, never forgotten. He said something is sustainable if a choice you make now is not constraining the choices that are available in the future. And I think that applies to all levels of state government, all parts of state government, And the Sustainability Board has the opportunity to improve operations of state government, look for ways to be more efficient, look for new opportunities to do things better. I'm frankly excited about that possibility and looking for ways to boost the impact of the Sustainability Board across state government and working with local partners as well.
Thanks. We'll go to you, Mr. Cray. How would you use your leadership on the Sustainability and Environment Board?
Water is an ever increasing valuable resource, so sustainability is absolutely key. And there's a lot of areas that get irrigated for farming purposes that when the population was small and the water was seemingly endless, it might have made sense. But I think there's going to have to be some changes that are going to have to be made about water usage and what's the highest and best use. So sustainability, absolutely, and making hard decisions is going to be part of the deal.
Thank you. Mr. Manning.
We look at the makeup of the sustainability right now, 11 members, public and private. One of the things that we have to do first is that we have to ensure diversity of the public Sustainability Board. We have to include tribal members, bring them to the table. We have to include people of color, bring them to the board, because we all have a stake in this. I think that once we start doing the right thing by all Oregonians, it can do nothing but improve everything that we do. I think that everybody should have a seat at the table, and not only have a seat at the table, should have a voice at the table. All of these members are appointed by the governor. So I encourage, as we move forward, that tribal nations be included in this and more diversity be included in the Sustainability Board. I think that that's going to help drive us into the future.
Thank you. Mr. Stauffer.
Oregon has had a commitment, and particularly the Democratic Party of Oregon has had a commitment to environmental sustainability for a long time. And actually the Republicans join with us as far back as Tom McCall. The Republicans have been in favor of environmental improvements and sustainability. So the motive amongst all Oregonians is there. However, we haven't, as a state government, figured out how to solve our environmental problems. Like I said, our traffic jams, morning and evening rush hour traffic jams are in every city in Oregon, and they cause air pollution and it wastes an incredible amount of time. People lose hours a day traveling to work and traveling from work, breathing polluted air. And there has to be a solution to that. The commitment is there. Everybody says, we don't want that, but I have got a solution for that. In addition, I've got solutions to the cost of utilities. I've got a way of heating and cooling your house without burning fossil fuels. So that's what I would hope to do as Secretary of State.
Thank you. We'll go back here to start with Mr. Cray. I'll circle back a little bit to elections, and I'd hope to get everyone's thoughts about the ranked choice voting measure the Oregon legislature is sending to voters in November. How will that, are you supportive of that? How do you think that will change the election system for Oregonians?
I absolutely love ranked choice voting. I paid attention to Maine and I've paid attention to Alaska, both of which have ranked choice voting. And I've liked what I've seen the results up there to be. I love the fact that it brings in all the voters and it's not a closed primary. I like the fact that non-affiliated voters finally have a voice in choosing who's going to be into the general election. I like the fact that it tends to weed out on both sides the fringe people And I just think it's the right way to go. It's not like it's an on-tried or on-tested system. Alaska and Maine are both testaments to the fact that it works, and it works very well. So am I in favor of it? Absolutely.
Thanks, Mr. Manning. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, the first thing I would ask is that Oregon has the highest voter participate rate in the nation. We're about very high. So I'm trying to think of, and as we increase and expand outreach through motor voter, through the Oregon Health Plan when they apply, through the bill I propose to engage and enroll university and college students first time. The question that remains in my mind is that what are we trying to fix? We have a system that's working very well. The other part about it is that I'm kind of nervous about ranked choice and how that will impact or not impact or negatively impact communities of color, people that don't have name recognition, don't have statewide name recognition. So I did vote on to move that bill out of Senate Rules Committee, and I did vote on it to move it out of the Senate because it's a bill that's going to be going to the people. And whatever the people decide as Secretary of State, that's what I will implement.
Thank you. Mr. Stauffer, your thoughts on ranked choice voting for Oregon?
Well, I agree with Mr. Manning. We've got a system that's working very well. If it ain't broke, why fix it? And also, it's going to confuse a lot of people for a lot of time, and they won't really know what they're voting for. And I would vote to just keep it the same for the system that has already worked.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Read.
This is one of those examples, I think, where it's important to think through the whole process. And it's one of the things that I learned when I moved from the legislature, where I learned a lot of things, to the Treasury, where I learned that often passing the bill is the first step. It's the implementation that matters. So I'm always going to be intrigued by, even enthusiastic about things that are going to make it easier for people to vote, that are going to make it more attractive for people to vote, allow people to feel more of a stake and a motivation to vote. But in my conversations with the vast majority of the county clerks at this point, they are all saying two things simultaneously about ranked choice voting. They all express some version of anxiety about how to implement this well. And then happily they say, but we'll figure it out. They talk about details that I don't think a lot of people have thought about. The question of who is the provider of ballots, of who prints the ballots, what's the technology and its capacity to deal with a different system? How will we count ballots, particularly in races that span more than one county? So having to think through all of these details is going to be really essential if voters pass this proposal and if we're to have a good outcome and a good implementation. That's why I think it is, again, so important to have a Secretary of State with that demonstrated track record of taking complicated, challenging concepts and delivering results in a way that people will improve their feeling about voting. That's how I'm thinking about this very important question.
Great, thanks, Mr. Manning. We'll go back down to you. Part of the what a primary vote is that you guys have a lot of the same answers to some of these questions. You're all Democrats. So what to voters, what makes you stand apart? Why should they choose you out of the crowd to be the Democratic choice for November? And I'll start with you, Mr. Manning. It looks like you're on mute there. Can skip you. We'll start with Mr. Stauffer and we'll come back around to Mr. Manning at the end. Oh, I see you now.
I've got it.
There he goes.
Yeah, I had some computer glitches here.
Yeah.
So
No worries. My question was just, it's a primary election. You're all Democrats. So what's your case for voters to why to kind of pick you out of the crowd and be the Democratic choice for November?
I'm a public servant running to restore trust and integrity in the office of Secretary of State. I will defend our democracy, preserve vote by mail, and ensure elections workers are protected and Oregon's data is secure. As I've mentioned before, as a United States Army Assistant Inspector General, I will use the power of the audit to ensure and improve upon transparency and accountability of our departments, divisions, agencies, and state-run programs. As a member of the State Land Board, Oregonians can count on me. They can really count on me to ensure that our public lands, waterways, and state forests are not for sale. That's why I've earned the exclusive endorsement of former Congressman Peter DeFazio and the Sierra Club and 350 Salem, Oregon. My commitment to preserving our precious waterways and natural resources for future generations is unwavering. As next Secretary of State, these are my commitments. I am overqualified, I am result-oriented, and I deliver. I have a strong decorated military record to show that as well. So, vote jamesmanning.com.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Stauffer. What sets you apart, do you think?
Well, as I've mentioned previously, the Secretary of State is also the chair of the Oregon Board of Sustainability and Environmental Improvements. And I'm uniquely qualified there because I have got 5 U.S. patents on inventions that I've made that have a strong value to the environment of Oregon. We've ignored some problems. We've ignored these rush hour traffic jams. We've ignored the shortage of water. We've ignored the problems with the lower Klamath River basin where the salmon can't swim up and spawn because there isn't enough water being allowed down the river from the upper Klamath basin. I've got solutions for those problems, and that's what makes me different. Incidentally, if one of the other candidates should become the Secretary of State, and I would be happy to work for them to help instigate the solutions that I've invented.
Thanks. Mr. Read, we'll go to you next.
Well, I think there is pretty universal recognition about the importance of this race and all that is at stake at this particularly tumultuous time. But there's only one candidate in this race who has been in statewide office, who has been at the helm of a statewide agency in Oregon, who's had the challenge of setting a vision, of establishing a culture, of making sure that hundreds of people with high stakes work that people count on have the resources they need to do their job and are held accountable. That's my record. That is why the 3 former secretaries of state who have done this job in the past have all endorsed me. Barbara Roberts, Gene Atkins, Phil Kiesling. They know what it takes to do this job well, and they all came to one conclusion, that I am best situated to do this job. That's one of the reasons that I'm excited about taking it on. And look, I am realistic. I don't think anyone has ever accused me of being the most exciting, flashiest candidate in any race that I've run. But it seems to me that we've had enough excitement and drama in the Secretary of State's office of late. So I want to bring the same focus on integrity and results to the Secretary of State's office that I've had as your state treasurer for the last 7 years. And that's why I'm running for this office. That's why I'm excited to take on the challenges.
Thanks. Mr. Cray, we'll finish with you here on kind of what sets you apart from your Democratic opponents.
What sets me apart is I'm the only one that'll talk specifics. I tell you exactly what I want to do. The electronic candidate form. I want to have a tab on the website where any registered voter can ask questions of any or all the candidates. I'm the only one that gives my phone number out. If somebody has a question, my phone number is 541-531-2912. Call me and I'll answer your question. I won't dodge the question. I'll give you a straight answer. So I'm the only one that's going to give voters something that they don't already have, that ability to ask questions of candidates. I'm going to travel the state talking to county clerks and high school and college people, just so we can get this electronic candidate form going. I'm an outsider. I have outsider thoughts. I'm not wedded to certain ways to doing things. I'm going to look at something with a perspective that certain people might not have because they're so ingrained in the system. I'm not using this office as a stepping stone to a higher office. I'm doing this for one purpose, and that's to get the electronic candidate form up and running so people, voters, registered voters, can be empowered, engaged, and educated. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks. We're kind of bumping up against our hour-long break here, but we want to make sure that we give everyone 2 minutes to kind of give their closing thoughts and their final remarks. So, Mr. Stauffer, we'll start with you for a 2-minute closing remark.
We've got a scientific problem in Oregon and the United States. The leading scientists have said that we're going to get to a point where we have difficulty breathing the air and where it gets so hot that we can't go outside. And we can ignore that. In fact, that's what everybody's comfortable doing. But eventually, if we get to a point where you can't walk outside because it's so hot, you get nauseated and die of heat stroke, then we'll think back, we should have done something. And that's what my main focus here is. I think we need to start doing something about these environmental crises. And we're uniquely positioned for it right now because President Biden has $1.4 trillion for infrastructure changes that he hasn't spent yet. And I would hope that Oregon would get part of that money and that we would make a difference on our environment. My 5 environmental inventions can make a difference for the state of Oregon and eventually America. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Read, 2 minutes.
Well, I want to start by thanking you and all the city clubs for making the opportunity available to all of us to have this conversation. This is an important office that can sometimes be overlooked. But as we look around the country, I don't think we have to look very far to see evidence of why this office and these issues really matter. There's bad policy being passed in other states. There are people being threatened with violence. These things are not things that we should take for granted. And we have a lot going for us in Oregon, but we need a Secretary of State with the experience and the ability to stand up for those important values that we cherish. In addition, the auditing function has to be restored to a position of credibility. And we need a Secretary of State who's going to be about results, who's going to bring stability and professionalism to an office that sorely needs it. I'm very proud of the record that I've built as your state treasurer. I'm looking forward to continuing that record as the next Secretary of State. Thanks for the time.
Thank you. Mr. Cray.
I really do not like, that's a soft word. I actually hate the way so many campaigns are run. Candidates spend more time dialing for dollars, trying to raise money so that they can throw mud at their opponent and try to get someone to vote against their opponent rather than vote for them. I want to change that. I want candidates to spend their time not dialing for dollars and throwing mud and avoiding answering direct questions, but answering the questions from the voters. Can you imagine if voters voted for people who had the best answers to their questions? We would finally get elected officials who would actually address the issues that we face. So the electronic candidate form will empower, educate, and engage, especially young people. You know, I started off this with the percentage of voters in 2022, and it was 66.9%. And the difference between that and 2004. Too many people don't feel like their vote means a thing. And by empowering them, educating and engaging them, they will realize that their vote does mean something and they'll vote informed. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Manning. 2 minutes as a closing remark.
You. This First off, City Club of Central Oregon, let me say thank you for this opportunity. This has been very meaningful for me to be here and to share my perspective on why I am the best candidate for Oregon Secretary of State. As I've served in the United States Army for over 24 years to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, I have done the same obligation to the state of Oregon. I have served in positions where my leadership actually matters, where there are actually lives at stake under my charge, and I've not lost not one soldier. I have made complicated but accurate decisions on the spot. Proven leadership is something that I have already demonstrated. I've demonstrated over 24 years. And since I have been in the Oregon State Senate, I have shown that I do move things forward. Universal health care, which is a signature bill of mine, that's going to provide health care for all Oregonians. This is something I worked on for 7 years. It takes a visionary tactician to do this. My leadership skills and abilities are unremarked. I'm running because I'm a public servant. I'm running to restore trust and integrity to the office of Secretary of State. I'll protect our elections and ensure that vote by mail is always here for Oregonians, no matter when. I'll make sure that we expand on access to the ballot. Those things are doable. There are opportunities for us to help improve our numbers by bringing more to the table, our electorate. State land boards, I'm committed. I would never sell our waterways, public lands, or forests. They belong for generations yet to come. VoteJamesManning.com.
Great. Thank you all. Thank to all candidates for participating in today's forum. Voters appreciate hearing directly from you. Reminder to viewers, your vote is your voice. Primary ballots will be mailed out May 1st, and make sure you get those ballots back in the mail by May 21st so that voice can be heard. For more information about the candidates in the 2024 primary election, please check out vote411.org. Thank you all for watching.